There was no one at home when I got back from my jog. The afternoon sun still clung to the pavement outside, making the tiles under my feet feel slightly warm. My shirt stuck to my back, so I peeled it off, slinging it over my shoulder as I stepped inside. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. Emily's car was in the driveway, so I knew she was still at work. I figured Jake might have gone out too. But the scent of fresh coffee drifted from the kitchen, warm and bitter, familiar. Someone was here. I rounded the corner, and there he was, Jake, standing at the counter, back to me, pouring coffee into a chip mug with his usual slow movements. He was shirtless, too, wearing only a pair of dark joggers. His skin was lightly tanned, his shoulders broader than I remembered. He didn't turn around right away. "You're back," he said, voice low, casual. "Yeah," I replied, wiping sweat from my neck with the edge of my shirt. Thought I'd get in a run before the sun really kicks in. He turned halfway, offering the mug slightly in my direction. "Want one?" "Sure," I said, trying to sound normal. Calm, like my heart hadn't started picking up pace, just seeing him there. He poured another cup without saying much, then handed it to me. Our fingers brushed. It was accidental, probably, but it was a kind of contact that lingered in my mind more than it should have. I sipped slowly, standing awkwardly near the fridge. "You been running every morning now?" he asked, settling onto one of the kitchen stools. "Trying to," I said. "Helps clear my head." Jake nodded, staring into his cup. "Good habit." There was something about his tone, neutral, but not cold. Jake had always been a bit of an enigma. Not distant, not unfriendly either, just unreadable. I'd been staying with Emily and him for a few weeks during my summer break, and most of our interactions were casual. Small talk, shared meals, the occasional movie night. Nothing ever lingered. But something about today felt different. There was something in the way he looked at me now. Longer, slower. I leaned against the counter, eyes flicking across the room, trying to pretend I didn't feel the air shift. "How's work been?" I asked, needing to fill the silence. He shrugged. "Same. Busy. You know how Em is. Keeps the bar running tighter than a Navy ship. She's been putting in double shifts lately." "Yeah, she's barely home," I said, and immediately regretted it. It sounded like a complaint. Or worse, an invitation. Jake glanced at me over the rim of his mug, a small half-smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You lonely?" The question hung there. I gave a nervous chuckle, trying to brush it off. "I've been worse." He nodded, but didn't say anything. We sat in that silence for a while, drinking coffee that was starting to cool. I watched the way the muscles in his forearms shifted when he gripped the mug, the way his lips pressed together in thought. I tried not to watch, but I did anyway. "You always so quiet after a run?" he asked, finally. "Just thinking," I said. "It's when my brain actually shuts up for a bit." He chuckled. "Must be nice. Mine doesn't stop." I smiled, but something about the moment made my skin prickle. I could feel him looking at me. Not just glancing, really looking. When I met his eyes, he didn't look away. There was a beat. Long. Still. Then he said, "You're different than I expected." "What do you mean?" He paused, like he was searching for a version of the truth that wouldn't sound too honest. "I dunno. Just thought you'd be more like Emily. But you're quieter. You see things." I swallowed. "You notice that?" He shrugged, but there was a softness in his eyes now. "Yeah." I set my mug down and opened the fridge, pretending to look for something. I needed something to break that gaze. Found a bottle of water and stood up, shutting the fridge with my hip. As I turned, Jake was right there, closer than I expected. Not too close, but close enough. He hadn't moved loudly. I hadn't heard him get up. Our eyes met again. I felt his hand brush against my side as he reached past me, supposedly for something on the counter. But he didn't take anything. He just stayed there for a second, that light contact between us sending a jolt up my spine. He didn't apologize. I didn't ask why. We just stood there. Nothing was said, but something had shifted, and both of us knew it. I stayed in the kitchen longer than I needed to. The coffee had gone cold. but I kept sipping at it, pretending to enjoy the bitterness. Jake had taken his seat again, elbows resting on the counter, casually scrolling through something on his phone. But I could feel his eyes flick to me now and then. Not obvious, not constant, but definitely there. I opened the cabinet, looked around aimlessly, then leaned against it, arms crossed over my chest. The silence between us had weight to it. Like we were both waiting for something neither of us had the courage to name. He finally broke it. "So, you seen anyone?" I blinked. The question came out casually, like he was asking what show I was watching. But it wasn't small talk, not with the way his eyes lingered on me as he asked. "No," I said slowly. "Not really." Jake tilted his head slightly. "Not really." I shrugged, giving a crooked smile. I talk to people, but nothing serious. He nodded thoughtfully, looking down at his phone again. "You're young. No rush." I didn't know what to say, so I just muttered, "Yeah." Another pause. His phone screen dimmed, then went dark. He didn't touch it again. "Hard to find something real, isn't it?" he asked, voice a little lower now. I studied him. His jaw was tight, brow creased. "Yeah," I said after a beat. "Especially when people don't really say what they mean." He looked up at that, eyes narrowing just slightly. "That's supposed to be about me?" "No." I replied quickly, then hesitated. "Maybe." Jake leaned back on the stool, stretching his arms. His muscles shifted under his skin like slow waves, smooth and effortless. "You think I'm hiding something?" "I don't know," I said. "Sometimes it feels like you say a lot without saying anything at all." His lips curled into a slight grin. "I could say the same about you." I opened my mouth, but before I could respond, he stood up. He walked around the counter slowly, the stool creaking behind him. He didn't say anything else, just stood a few feet away from me, looking, really looking. I straightened up, heart pounding now. The coffee cup in my hand felt suddenly useless. I set it down. "You don't have to be afraid of me," he said quietly. "I'm not," I replied, but my voice was barely a whisper. Jake stepped closer, just one small movement. "Then why are you shaking?" I hadn't even noticed I was. My fingers twitched at my sides. Maybe it was the anticipation, the heat rising between us, the risk. He reached for a glass on the counter. Whether he needed it or not, I couldn't tell. His hand brushed mine, slowly, intentionally. I looked up at him, and he was already watching me, not with judgment, not even with lust, just something deeper, softer, and that's what made it more dangerous. "I shouldn't," he murmured, more to himself than to me. "But you want to?" I replied. It wasn't a question. He nodded, barely. Then he reached out, slow, deliberate, and touched my jaw with his fingertips. I froze, unsure what to do, but I didn't move away. My breath caught in my throat. He leaned in. The space between us disappeared so gradually that I almost didn't realize we were kissing until it happened. His lips were warm, gentle at first, hesitant, like he was waiting for me to pull back. I didn't. Instead, I leaned into it, feeling the quiet desperation in his touch. There was no rush, no fire, just the ache of something forbidden, something long held back. His hand slid behind my neck, pulling me just slightly closer. The kiss deepened, still careful, still unsure, but more certain now. I felt his chest rise against mine, the rhythm of our breathing completely out of sync. Then he pulled away. We were both quiet, faces close, breaths shallow. Jake looked at me like he was trying to read something in my expression, something he wasn't sure he wanted to find. "I don't know what this is," he said. "Me neither." He stepped back slowly, like whatever was between us might snap if he moved too fast. "I'm sorry," he said, though he didn't sound sorry. I didn't say anything. I just watched as he turned, walked back to counter, picked up his now empty mug, and pretended like nothing had happened. I stood there for a few seconds more, heart thudding loud in my ears, then quietly walked to my room and closed the door. But the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of what we didn't say. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the ceiling like it might offer answers. My lips still tingle from the kiss. My heart hadn't settled since I left the kitchen. I kept replaying it, every second, every shift of breath, every touch. It hadn't been frantic or clumsy. It had been soft, careful, dangerous in its calmness. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. Guilt? Maybe. But mostly I felt confused. About him. About myself. About what this all meant. The light from the window spilled across the floor in strips, and somewhere in the hallway, I heard the soft creak of floorboards. I held my breath, but nothing followed. No knock, no footsteps toward my door. Just silence again. The next morning, Emily was back. Her laugh echoed from the living room as I came down the stairs. She was on the phone, pacing, talking quickly. Her energy filled the space that had been so still the day before. Jake was already at the kitchen table, eating toast, phone in hand, glasses on. He looked up when I entered, but didn't say anything. Not right away. Not like yesterday. Morning, I mumbled, grabbing a glass of water. Morning, he replied, flatly, polite, casual, too casual. He didn't look at me the same way. Not anymore. Not like the night before, when his gaze held a weight that pulled me in. Now it was like someone had wiped it all clean, like it never happened. Emily walked in a minute later, still mid-conversation. She kissed the top of Jake's head as she passed, completely unaware. I felt sick. I sat across from him, pretending to check my phone. The silence between us now wasn't the same as before. It wasn't curious or charged. It was suffocating. He cleared his throat. You heading back to campus this weekend? Yeah, I said. Probably Saturday. He nodded, chewing slowly. Good. You'll beat the traffic. That was all he said. Then he got up, rinsed his plate, and left the kitchen. I stayed behind, trying to breathe through whatever the hell was happening inside my chest. Later that afternoon, I found myself out on the back porch, sitting on the steps, legs stretched out in the sun. The house behind me was quiet again. Emily had gone to meet a friend for lunch. Jake was somewhere upstairs. Or maybe out. I didn't know. I closed my eyes, letting the heat settle into my skin, hoping it would burn away the thoughts. But it didn't. It only made them louder. I heard the door creak open behind me. I didn't turn around. I knew it was him before he spoke. He sat beside me without a word. We didn't look at each other. Not at first. Just sat there, both staring out into the backyard, like it might offer some kind of escape. After a while, he said, "We shouldn't have done that." I swallowed, jaw tight. Yeah, I know. He looked down at his hands. I don't know what I was thinking. I nodded, still not meeting his eyes. Neither do I. The silence came again, this time thick with the weight of what we'd done and the wall we'd just put up between us. Jake leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. You're a good kid. You didn't deserve to get pulled into this. I turned then, finally looking at him. I'm not a kid. He glanced at me, expression unreadable. I know. I wanted to ask what it meant. The kiss, his words, his regret. I wanted him to explain it all, to tell me it wasn't just a moment of weakness, that it meant something. But I couldn't bring myself to say any of it. Instead, I said, "Are you going to tell her?" Jake looked away. No. And what happens now? He exhaled, slow and heavy. Nothing. We move on, like it didn't happen. The words hit harder than I expected. But maybe that was the only way this could end. I nodded slowly, rising to my feet. Okay. That night, I packed quietly. No one said much. Emily asked if I needed anything before I left, and I smiled, said I was good. She hugged me, told me to call when I got back. Jake stood by the door, hands in his pockets. As I grabbed my bag and stepped out onto the porch, he finally spoke. Liam. I turned. He didn't move closer, just looked at me like he was trying to memorize something he'd already decided to forget. I'm sorry, he said. I stared at him, uncertain. For the kiss? He hesitated. For everything. I nodded once. Yeah, me too. Then I walked to my car, opened the door, and didn't look back. And as I drove away, the road stretched ahead of me, empty and endless, while behind me, the weight of what we did stayed lodged in my chest, quiet, buried, and unforgettable.